I'm Josh.
And I'm Ben.
And this is the Accidental Marketers Podcast, where we have conversations with marketing leaders at tech companies, as well as business owners we think are doing interesting things, with a heavy focus on growth strategies. We hope you enjoy the show.
All right. Hi, I'm Ben Yost, and I'm joined by my partner, Josh Elkin. We're the founders of LinkFlow and co-hosts of the Accidental Marketers Podcast, where we feature top marketing and growth leaders in the B2B SaaS and tech space. This episode is brought to you by LinkFlow. We're a link building service geared toward the software and tech industry that helps our clients increase traffic and revenues through high quality link building and SEO strategy. You know, Heidi, a year or so ago, we had a healthcare software company as a client that wanted to rank for super competitive terms, but was sitting on page 3 of Google and getting basically no clicks. We helped them 10x their traffic, outrank Wikipedia and the New York Times in just 6 months. Now, we got into this because we heard so many horror stories and experienced firsthand shady link builders not being transparent and providing low quality links with little care as to impact the links we're going to have on their site. And if you want to learn more about LinkFlow, go to linkflow.ai, and you can email me even directly at ben@linkflow.ai with any questions that you might have. Now, before introducing today's guest, I want to give a big shout out to Level Equity. Go check out their website at www.levelequity.com. They specialize in funding small to medium-sized tech and software companies, and they're doing some really cool things over there. Go check them out. Now, without further ado, I'd like to introduce Heidi Fung. Heidi is the founder and CEO of AriseDaily.io, a marketplace matching expert fixers to seed series B founders with nebulous challenges. Usually they're scaling and go-to-marketing issues. Now, she's passionate about building the future of work and closing the knowledge wealth gap, one small project at a time. Previously, she was associate partner at Monitor Deloitte. Heidi, it's great to have you on.
Hey, Ben. Hey, Josh. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So why don't you tell us a little bit about how you got started over at Arise Daily and, where did the idea come from?
Yeah, absolutely. So I, after leaving Monitor for a little while for a sabbatical, I started consulting for friends who had startups and also for nonprofits. And I just really enjoyed the work. I was like, I can have so much impact for a few hours. And the things that I'm saying, which are super obvious to me, are kind of golden nuggets for other people who haven't, been in my shoes before. I just thought there should be more people doing this, but all the amazing people who have lots of experience as consultants, as operators, as startup founders, they just don't have the time to find clients and to do all the administrative stuff. So what they do is they end up just giving advice for free, or they give advice for equity, and it's a very long-term arrangement that they have. And so I just thought, there could be so many more startups and small businesses that do well if they just had a little bit of time from someone who can help them a lot. So that's how the idea came into place. I knew that this is important because as a consultant, I would work for CEOs of Fortune 50 companies, and I could see how a $2-3 million project could help them really move along would really help to move along their agenda, right? All their GMs, all their SVPs have full-time businesses to run. And they're like, hey, let's do a transformation. They just don't have arms and legs. So that's what I came up with. And I thought, 1 hour with an advisor every month isn't enough. You wish you could ask that advisor hey, the advice you just gave me, whether it's on SEO content writing or, how to build out my content, could they spend 4 to 5 hours actually helping me to do it, right? No one has that time. So we found a way to monetize it. We sell projects based on deliverables, time-bound, goal-oriented, and it's something very different because everybody else just sells people's time by the hour. And that's a long gap between what you think the person can do for you and what you need them to do. So we could try to close that gap. So anyway, that's a long answer to your short question.
Sorry, Ben, go on.
I was going to say, how did your experience over at Monitor kind of play into that and tie in and prepare you for what you're doing now over at Arise?
Yeah, I think it's understanding two things. One is how, making your clients feel like that they're supported, that you've got their back is really important, especially in the gig industry. And I consider us part of the gig industry, right? And then the second thing is really this idea that you're buying a deliverable, you're buying impact. Like if that project doesn't deliver what you told them it would, then you would either get your money back or you would get, you wouldn't be in a situation where you get your money back, but like Monitor would put more people against that project until it was completed to satisfaction. And those are the two things which I think are kind of key to my business. And going back to the first one, like all the clients that I have now are founders, right? They're amazing. I feel like they're superheroes. You have to be the expert in everything and you're kind of holding the ship together and everyone thinks you're a superhero and your investors think you're great. And there's sometimes where you're like, I spend a lot of my time being the visionary and the fixer. And would it be so nice to have someone who could just help you out? And you don't need a lot of help. You don't need a full-time person. You can't afford a full-time person. And so anyway, it's just like, how do you make people feel great while helping them? So
no, that makes a lot of sense. And so on the helper side, the mentors, who are these people, and kind of how do you find them?
Yeah. So right now, okay. So who are these people? The people have to be kind of three things. One, they have to demonstrate that they've had significant like operational experience. Most of them are VPs, SVPs, CEOs, and they are looking to help other people. They are at the pinnacle or almost at the pinnacle of their career, and they have a limited amount of time, but they are also open to helping really promising individuals who are building something new. Because it kind of gets bored if you've been a CFO for maybe like 10 years, like unless you're taking something IPO, it's not that interesting. So they can like jump in. Yeah. But where do I find them? We're a referral only. So all of our experts who are on our site are, a friend of a friend of a friend or coworker. So that's how we have gotten them. Yeah. So
someone like our mutual buddy, Andrew, who runs Brodo, could be someone who would help maybe an early stage startup with a GTM strategy or something like that.
Exactly. And for my experts, the reason why they do it, people are like, why do your experts do it? Right? Aren't they already wealthy? Aren't they super busy?
Right.
It's an intellectual study break. One of the best things about consulting is you kind of move from problem to problem, cases to cases, and it's really fulfilling for a certain type of person. And Arise Daily lets you do that. People take sabbaticals, and a lot of our experts come on board when they're like, oh, I'm taking a sabbatical for 3 months. I still want to stay fresh. I want to meet new people during this time and get paid for that work. So, and I think this is the future.
Stuff gets boring. Yeah.
Totally. Yep. Yeah.
Cool. So when did you start Arise Daily?
I started Arise Daily about 1.5 years ago. And it was, before I started it, I had conversations with, I think, 130 different people, startup founders, experts. And the genesis of the idea was that I think work is kind of broken for people at the senior most levels. This is what's broken. For people who are VPs, SVPs, for people who want to hire VPs and SVPs, it's very fixed. Either it's a full-time job or nothing. These jobs pay a lot of money and they require someone to invest and be there for like 2 to 3 years, right? Otherwise, it doesn't make sense. And people, like you said, are stuck. They're like, this is getting boring. I don't know what I'm doing next. There's a lot of latency. And the other side, unless you're a corporate or you're like a really big startup, you can't really afford these people. And I was like, there's got to be a way to kind of free up that labor. And we've seen this happen, at the lower ends of the labor market, right? You have Fiverr, Upwork, you just pay for what you need. Yeah. And I liken it to online shopping, right? The Amazons of the world came first. And then now you have moda operandi where people are buying $2,000 handbags sight unseen for a picture. So really the market is ripe. A lot of my clients are people who grew up in the gig economy. They're like, they need something to eat, they head to DoorDash. They need a ride, they head to Uber. They, need a date or something fun to do, they go to Tinder. So like being finding an SVP of marketing to take a second look at their go-to-market strategy, they're happy coming to us to find that. Yeah.
Cool. No, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, it's pretty. I love the idea. Honestly, it's a really cool idea. What were some of like the biggest turning points for the company?
I think the biggest turning points for the company were, one, like realizing how to scale sales and marketing. Right. At first, I was like, the usual startup founder, kind of hand-to-hand combat, making the matches, doing, making the marketplace clear, right? And so then figuring out, okay, well, what part did I need to do, right? Increasingly, I did the whole thing at first, and then I have an ops person that does the back end. We figured out our algorithm to do the matching. And it's really interesting because some of the experts, I literally use Arise Daily to build Arise Daily, right? I have the person who was like the number one, the first employee at Match.com. I have the person who helped build Airbnb's initial algorithm, helping me figure out, okay, well, of the 90 different things that we kind of measure, like what are the most important three? So it was like kind of scaling how quickly we did the matches and making sure that people felt like it was very customized, which it is, having all these auto emails, like that kind of thing, and using all the no-code tools. I feel like I'm so lucky to be founding a company at this time, like versus 5 years before, because at the very beginning, I could do a lot of things kind of scrappily. So I think that's the turning point. And I think from a product perspective, the turning point was realizing that it was figuring out, for someone who's an SVP of marketing, what are the 2 to 3 projects that they sell? For someone who's a CFO of a health tech company, what are the 2 things that they sell? For a COO of a retail tech company, we basically figured out that her magic was scaling problems. So she does like a 3-hour work session. She does like a 10-hour thing. So it's really helping, then you or Josh figure out like, what is that 3-hour, 10-hour thing that you sell, and then helping them, sell it again and again, and fitting it into times which they're available. That's what my experts have loved. And that's what my clients have too, because they kind of have their own program for what this is.
Yeah, that makes sense. So something that we struggle with is always like that trade-off between being broad and being like laser focused, right? Like, are we going to be a link building agency? Are we going to be an SEO agency? Are we going to be a link building agency focused on SaaS? You must wrestle with this or have wrestled with this in the past. Like, do you just want to, hey, we focus on go-to-market strategy for startups, or, we help startups do a range of things, whether it's like, financing or go-to-market, or like, how do you kind of, I know go-to-market is a focus point for you guys, but it's not exclusively what you do. Like, how do you kind of think about that trade-off between focusing on a very specific service and being more broad?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think part of it at first was trial and error. I don't think we started doing go-to-market. We started thinking about, helping people fundraise, helping people do general marketing. And then we realized like what doesn't exist. And it was go-to-market and scaling. And by scaling, that's like you just raised your A, you're going from like 13 people to 30 people. How do you do that most efficiently, right? Like, how do you as a COO use your time? How does that change? So once we focused on those 2, we then said, okay, for anyone who's a repeat client, so we know you, we know the types of experts you like. If you came and said, hey, do you have a PR expert? We're about to launch our fundraising announcement, Series B, and I want to be a thought leader. Do you have a PR person? So we will go off ranch for people who we know are great clients. Right. And I think so it's a little bit of the best of both worlds in that there are certain things that we sell a lot of. And so if you're kind of unproven, we only sell those things. And then if we know you, and you ask for something, we're basically kind of ask Jeeves, like, do you have this type of person? And you asked me about a story to tell. And I think this is a great one. One of our really great clients, he is based in Ireland. He's a second-time founder. His first company, I think he sold it for, a few $100 million. And he was creating this app which would help with privacy. And he had great clients. He had Twitter as a client. He had Grab in Southeast Asia as a client. And he came to us and he was like, I'm trying to like go deeper in the US market. So we connected him with a go-to-market person, someone who he wanted to get deeper into gaming, and he wanted to get deeper into healthcare, and also music streaming services. And so we literally found him an expert who was head of product at these three, like he had been a head of product at these three types of companies, like Spotify and Headspace and EA Games. And so they were able to do a go-to-market project. So after that, he was like, okay, this is great. And at the same time, he talked to another one of our experts who was like a super senior guy at Google, who looked at his tech and basically told him in an hour, like, no one's building what you're building. And he had a spidey sense that no one was building what he was building. But all the FANG companies were looking for that. But he's bootstrapped and he's based in Ireland. So he's not deep in the VC world, and no one could tell him that. But once he knew that he was onto something. And a few months later, when he got an offer from one of the FANG companies to purchase his company, he came back to us and he was like, hey, do you have someone in corp dev who's done a ton of deals who can just like look at the deal terms and tell me what's going on? And so he spent a few hours with one of our experts who literally did like 30 different transactions on behalf of FANG companies and on the other side of the table, and was like, okay, based on these terms, here's how you negotiate up this and this. You have this much additional headroom. Like, here's how you should, this type of team tends to like it when you come in, not with like all your lawyers flanking you, but you as an individual, and was able to just kind of give him advice who he didn't have anyone in that's network to give him. So that's one of our stories of he would just come to me when he had questions about things. And that's what we want to be for startup founders. You're just like, hey, I just needed this. It's almost like I think of Thumbtack, or I think of Thumbtack. I'm like, hey, I needed a light fixed yesterday and I need all these different things. And for businesses, you should be able to find the same thing. Upwork does that a little bit, but it's when you need a super senior person, it's different.
Yeah, totally makes sense.
Tell us, this is a question I always like to ask. What do you feel like is one of the bigger, pitfalls or mistakes that you've learned a lot from, either in your career or in Arise Daily, something like that?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest pitfalls is, and Malcolm Gladwell talks a lot about this in his Outliers book, if you guys have read that. He talks about how, if you're upfront with like, here are the things which are not going great, right? You kind of disarm people and you gain trust, and honestly, people are like, okay. So I feel like I'm a pretty optimistic person, and I've loved selling projects and Monitor and other places. And so I'd always be like, here's all the great things about Arise Daily. Here's what's totally going to work. But then I realized that a lot of times people are not yet believers, or not proven, or like, a little bit of column A and a little bit of column B. And so actually coming out and saying, hey, like, there are projects that we don't staff, but come back to us, or even saying, we basically match everyone within 48 hours. And there were some times where we like literally couldn't find an expert because it was something very niche, which was outside scaling or go to market, and just being straight up and saying, hey, like, we can't find anyone for you. Let us know if you want to continue the search, or whether you're going to look somewhere else. And I would say like 95% of the time people are like, yeah, keep looking for me. And then they're pretty forgiving on time frame. But the hurdle for me to say like, I don't have someone, was a really hard thing. But just being upfront and being like, look, like, here's one of the things we can't do, was, I think that was a big learning. I think the other big learning was like putting stuff out there before you're really comfortable with it. I feel like back in consulting world and everything else I've done in my life, it's like, let's not ship things unless they're perfect, because every dot on your I and every T crossed is really important. What I realized with startup life is you need to get the really important things done right. So for us, that's like a really trusted, well-matched expert that's, doing billing and making all that really frictionless, and ensuring that we've double checked that the problem our client wants answered can be done by the expert. That's it. Everything else, does the website need to be perfect? No. People want more case studies. People want more content. So I think what inspired me was actually one of my really good founder friends, Maddie Wang. She's a 22-year-old Stanford dropout. multi-time founder, Gen Z. And I talk a lot about Gen Z folks. I've worked with a lot of them, and they're so refreshing. They just want to ship stuff all the time. And I think that's a generational gap between like where I am and where they are. And so that's super inspiring. Just like ship stuff, try stuff out, and just be honest that that's what you're doing.
Yep. Just throw shit against the wall and see what sticks sometimes.
Yeah.
Cool. What's like, either personally or professionally, what's like a big challenge that you had to overcome?
I think the biggest challenge I had to overcome was time boxing, right? There's so much you can do. I mean, that's not a challenge. That was the solution. The challenge was really figuring out, how do I manage to work a reasonable life? I see Benjamin has a total cutie on his lap, right? I have 2 kids. The days where I could work like 80-hour weeks, like end on end for years, like that's just not possible anymore. But I feel like I'm like much more efficient because I can say, look, these are the times where I work, and then making enough time to actually have those conversations with founders, with investors, with other people. And then quickly, it's like really quickly realizing, what I can give to somebody else who might be so much better at it. Right? Whether it's like writing content for me, whether it's like doing all the ops, like letting go of anything which someone else could do much more efficiently than I can was very freeing. And to be like, almost someone was like violently delegating everything to somebody else who can do it much better than you. And I think that's sort of what I love. I like see everyone I work with and I'm like, you are so much better than me at all these different things. I like love working with folks who are like that. So I guess that's the hardest thing. And it's still a balance, right? Like there's weeks where don't work out, right? Or you miss something or miss. What about you guys? How do you kind of deal with the balance thing?
Routine.
Yeah. So
I have a serious
what's
routine,
that?
Or I go
routine. Yeah, I think we're both big routine guys, huh?
Yeah, I think so. I definitely think so. Yeah. Yeah, it's been a lifesaver. Like I've had ADD my whole life, diagnosed ADD at a young age, and it took me probably 20 years to figure out that like if I don't have a structured routine in the morning, the rest of my day is just garbage. Like it's just mindless wandering. I might as well just be like wandering in the woods somewhere, Yeah,
I agree. As someone who I think is undiagnosed ADD, I completely agree with you. Oh, one other thing that really helped is also having like kind of 2 books, right? One, which is like, and 2 books, I mean, all the ideas that I have, like I will write them down in one book and then be like, okay, the to-do list is this, right? It's kind of figuring out what is realistic for you to do in a day, which I think a lot of startup founders, like we're delusional, right? We're like, oh my gosh, we can totally get all this stuff done. We're building the future. And then, when it comes to the brass tacks, like the more you can have people help make that come alive and keep you organized, the better.
Yeah. Do you have anything like, I hate the word hacks. I can't stand it. But any like tricks to like keep you organized? Like how do you ensure that the things that are on your to-do list for that day get done?
Yeah. I think I basically just schedule them into my calendar. If they're not on my calendar, they get done. Yeah. And that's kind of more efficient. I do have like many long to-do lists, which are prioritized. And I use Notion, right? For all like my personal like road mapping. There's like all the workflow that happens in the company. And then I also have a personal one where I put all the other things. Yeah.
No, that's awesome. We for our company, we use ClickUp. And we have like, everyone has, tasks they have to do a certain day. And there's someone whose job is like ClickUp police. Yes. And their job is just making sure, hey, like if something got pushed, you were supposed to do it Wednesday, but it got pushed, multiple times, they'll follow up with you. And I'm going to be really vulnerable right now, but I started doing that for myself. And I actually hired someone. And their job is to keep me accountable to what I say I'm going to do in a certain day. And this sounds totally insane. Ben, I don't know if I've told you this, but I have my to-do list in ClickUp. You believe it? I have my to-do list in ClickUp, and it's like, say there's like 7 things I was supposed to do that day. I'm allowed to push things one day without a valid excuse. But if I push it more than one day, I have to pay a fine. There's like a penalty. And that system has like changed my life, because now shit just gets done because I know there's someone else who's watching me. And just like knowing there's accountability from someone else makes all the difference. And I know it's freaking insane, but what's that?
Like I say, you and I tried to do that, and neither of us are accountable enough to.
We're not accountable enough to hold each other accountable. So I found someone on Upwork, and I was like, I'll pay you $100 a month. Your job is to make sure that I do the shit that I say I'm going to do. And if I put it off twice, I'm penalized. And we've been doing that for a year now, and I don't know. And now I don't have to worry about like, am I going to do this or am I going to put it off? Because like it's all systematized, which is cool. And
I bet, so first of all, I'm super inspired. I feel like I need one of these people. I have an Arise Daily board that I talk to like every week, and they're separate from the company. But I think personally that would be helpful. I might go and get one of those folks myself. And I'm sure over time you actually realize like you're not going to put something on that list which isn't going to get done. Right. So it's almost like you're kind of refining what gets done.
You refine what's realistic. Yeah. And you're like, okay, yeah, I'll have 13 things that are due today and 1 thing that's due tomorrow. It's like, no, you might want to spread it out during the week. And then to your point of like calendarizing, that's the next level, is like when you can calendarize out those things on your Google Calendar. So like, okay, this is not only do I have to do this thing, but like, this is when I'm going to work on that thing. That's next level. And I won't say I'm always at that level, but like, that's ideal. And it's super hard to do, but like, I definitely believe in there's this Jocko guy who's like an ex-Navy SEAL who runs a podcast, who's like, discipline actually creates freedom. That's his whole mantra. And it's so like, you think like discipline, boxes you in, but by the more you can like structure out your days, your weeks, the less you're having to make these little micro decisions of like, well, what am I going to do now? What am I going to do now? The more it frees you up in a lot of ways to just be like, okay, well now my calendar says I'm doing my budgeting for an hour. And so I'm just going to do that. And I don't know, just it takes a lot of stress away, I find. So
I fully agree. I also think you said something, Josh, which was really cool, which I relate to a lot. As someone who loves working for other people, right? I love working consulting because I had so many managers. It's hard being a startup founder, right? Especially since we are bootstrapped and we're, growing in a bootstrapped way. I was like, I had to put together essentially my board. So I could say like, every week, like I'm reporting to them to be like, here are the outputs. I enjoy that a lot. And I think that is where a lot of startup founders kind of, run out of steam along their journey, because they're like, oh, no one's telling me I'm doing a good job, or no one's giving me feedback on what I'm doing wrong. So I think there's some stat around like most people just kind of run out of steam if they're solo founders, just because of that. Like the more structures you put in place to mimic that for yourself, the better, I guess.
Yes. And having a business partner is one way to do it. Having like Ben and I will hold each other, if Ben's slacking, he'll let me know if I'm slacking, of course. But like if you're on your own, then like having, creating your own structures, like a board or just like an accountability person, like I found, or a coach, It
just makes it easier too. Yeah. I mean, we've definitely found, I had my own agency prior to this one. And when I met Josh, like they were just, being a solopreneur is hard. It's super hard. And there's so much stress. And you go it alone, and it's like you're like on this little island, And when I met Josh, and we decided to go at this together, it's so much more fun, Like you can actually enjoy it because we're getting to do it together. We kind of share the burden of the day in, day out slugging. It's just that's been huge.
Yeah.
The accountability partner too is great as well. Yeah,
it's true. I almost I don't want to make this too much about us, but yeah, like. The business was like doing okay financially, but I was like just miserable and lonely. I think. And then I literally put up a job posting on a Facebook group that I was in, and Ben responded, and everything's just been a lot better since having a partner where you can just like bounce ideas off and, sometimes talk shit about people together and, celebrate wins together. And the losses don't hit as hard too when you have someone to share them with. So, I think that's been cool. But switching. Yeah, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was just gonna say, like, what was kind of, you asked earlier about what was transformational in so far. And I think it was like, literally, I talked about Maddie before. She's another solo founder who had much more experience. Once I actually found her, the two of us, we joke, we're like, we have different companies, but we operate together. Like, we touch base every few days, like we're co-founders.
That's awesome.
And she's like literally the yin to my yang, right? Like, she is an operational genius. And then I help her with like strategy and kind of thinking about like go to market, where she should be spending her time. And it's almost like we are co-founders, but we have very different businesses. So to your point, it's like finding that person who kind of clicks with you and is able to kind of bounce ideas. And you're like, oh my gosh, I didn't see that coming. I also think there's some that, people kind of poo-poo having an executive coach sometimes, but the reason why it is helpful, especially for solo founders, is to kind of give you perspective on where you are and how far you've come. It's really hard when, I grew up in the like, okay, you got a 95% on your exam. Like, what happened to 5%? Let's dissect what went wrong there, right? And I think that kind of drives a lot of folks like me and founders to keep pursuing, to like keep getting better, keep making the product, keep going. But it can also be a little toxic. So for someone to remind you like, hey, did you go for a run in nature without a podcast in? Like, actually listen to what's going on in you, like kind of, keeping that balance, I think. But I realize we're going really deep into personal stuff versus stuff.
No, I think it's good. I like this stuff's interesting. Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah. So I guess, I mean, I'm always, we're a marketing agency. I'm always interested in like, you do go to market, how, bringing it back to the business side, how many, I guess, companies or clients do you have now, for starters? And then like, what is kind of the best way for you to like, what's worked for acquiring more customers?
Yeah, so we're still at the early stage. We have a few hundred customers. They are, ranging from like C to Series A and B. And then there's a few on the other end, right? Really early stage folks, but are second-time founders, and then we have a few corporate clients too. But in general, they're there. What's worked for us? So at the very beginning, there's always the figuring out, and this is the training that I got at Monitor on marketing, right? It's like, who is your target customer and what is their pain point? And are you going to design something that takes friction out of it? And for us, it was always the same thing. It's someone who needs very senior expertise, who can't hire it, or they do have it, but they don't have enough of it. And so we just keep coming back to that. And one thing that we realized, and we did this kind of through A/B at the very beginning, through a lot of A/B testing, right? So it's just like putting out, for that target audience of people who I knew from my founders groups and whatever, like just trying out, like, are there specific occasions, right? All basic marketing stuff. When are the occasions where this is top of mind? And then we were able to kind of figure out, okay, it's when people are like coming up on fundraising and there's going to be lots of like detailed looks at their churn numbers and their LTV. So a few months out from that, they're like, oh my God, what can we do to kind of boost that? So it was always about urgency too around it. And so, sorry, I'm like wandering a bit, but again, it's the fundamentals of like who your person is and what their most intense pain point is and how you can solve it in a really frictionless way. And we did all kinds of testing. We did testing on LinkedIn. We did testing a little bit on Google as well. But I think where our really high quality leads, the reason why we built our base business pretty quickly is it was through referral. So the advice that I got from other people who are building marketplaces is like, you need that network effect kind of quickly. And the way you do it is through your own personal network and then your 2x your personal network. And what I realized is actually selling a lot of projects. I'm like, oh, here's an expert. And by the way, you know them. Right. So it's kind of duplicating that relationship, because that's how senior people find new jobs. Right. That's why headhunters get paid like $250,000 to play CEOs, because it's about that quality. So then we are now like figuring out like, how do we replicate that in our algorithm? And we take down people's personalities and what their preferences are. And we like machine learn like off of, okay, if you bought these types of projects before, and this is the expert you liked, like we figure out what it is about that match so that we can replicate it.
Got it. So you have a coder on your team who's building like machine learning algorithms to match clients or customers with experts.
Yes, but right now it's still what we like. It is frustrating to no end with our coder, because they want to do something deeper and it doesn't quite work. Like half the time, like it doesn't quite work because you need too many fields. So we're actually trying to figure out like how we get there faster, right? Like of the 90,
you need more data. You need more data.
Exactly. You need way too much. What we realized is like we needed so much data to get accuracy, and we realized that actually with fewer pieces of data, we could get to like 70% match over time, more than if we had the whole suite. And that actually went hand in hand with like just nailing down scaling and marketing, right? Like what were those different features? And it's interesting because we got that off of our expert who said, when they founded this dating app website, they'd like take all this information, but actually the only things which really matter are availability, physical location, and like age, and and the top defining like physical characteristic and the top defining like personality characteristic. Wow. And they were successful. Like, so, you think you need all these things, but for different projects for us, like different things are important. Scaling, it doesn't matter what industry you are per se, that industry match is less important. It's more the years that they've been a CEO.
Right. Like that's really interesting. I would like to circle back quickly to like building your business off of referrals. I think that's really interesting. It's something that we've tried to do unsuccessfully, I think, to be honest. But I'm really curious, like how you were able to do that, and yeah, can you tell me a little bit more about like how you got that to work, how you got it to click?
Sure. So there's no magic bullet. First of all, we tried all kinds of things. We were like, oh, if we give you 20% of the project that you give us, would you, refer one? Two things work the best. One is referrals from, there are two things. One is on the expert side. So our experts get reached out to by, people who they know who are like, hey, can you do something for us? And when they don't have time, they're like, hey, go to Arise Daily, go to Heidi, because they know that we'll match their client with someone excellent. So that was the first one. And then they also get a percentage. They get 10% of the project. So they're like, oh, I wasn't able to do it anyway. And oh, wow, I got 10%. So that worked really well. The other thing that works really well with referral is when we went to our network and we asked people to just refer one person who they knew, like one founder who they knew. Instead of asking people like, hey, can you just like spread the news about us?
Anyone.
Very specific. And make the ask small. I think I read that somewhere. Elizabeth Yin, who's a partner at Hustle Fund, she talked about how it was when she was fundraising. She just asked her network for like, if they seemed a little resistant, just ask for one referral. And people can always make one referral. So
I like the specificity of that ask.
Yeah, like the small and specific is really cool.
I like that. Yeah, we never thought to do that. It's always like, do you know anyone? But it's like, and then we never hear back. It's crickets, but
yeah, always.
And
you give up one person.
Yeah, and one thing that actually helped our referral a lot that we didn't realize was just, you guys are content folks, so was just to continue to like tell different customer success stories, right? Because we're so new, we're like inventing the future work. People are like, what? Like just continue to tell these stories on LinkedIn, because the referrals actually would come in. They're like, oh, hey, I saw this content that you posted on X or Y, and it made me think of you, even though the project and the client had nothing to do with what we posted. Just like continuing to tell that story again and again was was really interesting. And then I think this is sort of related. You asked me like, what was one of your like biggest setbacks earlier on where it didn't quite work out? So very early on, we had a client who was a longtime CEO, and he was an investor in a lot of different companies. And he's like, hey, we need someone to help out with one of my investments. Like the board chair left and they need someone to step up. They need like a consultant person to kind of run the board meetings to like really get the CEO up to speed. So like, great. So I thought I had the perfect match. This was like literally, I think like a month in. I was like, I had the perfect match. And then they had their introduction call. And then right after that, I sent a statement of work, which is what we do. And then basically, technically, like just invoiced him, right? And the feedback I got was like, the person was so taken aback. They were like, you didn't ask me how the meeting went. Like, this is like, if we just met at Starbucks and you wanted to go on a date with me. And what I realized is that at the end of the day, I was talking to the wrong person, right? They're of a different generation, but mostly because when you think of senior people and you think of like very trusted, like in a board meeting with like really serious people with a lot of trade secrets, like you can't just like pull someone off the street, right? But there was a ton more education that I needed to do about how this would work. Obviously, we're all covered under NDA. We don't like staff the same type of expert on on like many different projects in the same space, right? Because we just want to protect our clients. Like all these things were reassurances, but they just couldn't get over that education barrier. And so I think that was one of our very early failures, which was like, whoa, we're going to have to like do a ton of education before. Probably like early days in Uber. Like, would you get into a car where you don't get to check someone's driver's license? You've never been like,
right.
Yeah.
So I feel like we're at that stage. Still doing a lot of education.
Yeah, that's cool. It's a great idea. I think it's gonna take off with our generations of business leaders. Because we are all used to using very compartmentalized services like that.
Yeah, and and especially since I think they said something like 40% of Gen Z are entrepreneurs. So these are all people under the age 26,
Whoa,
right? So
that's
like,
nuts.
Yeah, isn't that crazy? Like they've all had their side gigs since high school. Like they jump in and out of corporate jobs all the time, and just our economy, I mean, they're still getting corporations, but like at the fringe, it's much more like cottage. Everyone has their own cottage industry. And so it's like, how do we make it really easy? Or let's just say I'm like, oh, hey, Josh and Ben, I might not want to do a massive SEO project, but like, because you guys have seen everything, can you spend like 6 hours with me just like working through stuff? And then I will and then I give you and then you just wave your QR code and I just pay you like on the spot. And you're like, okay, cool. Like this is what Arise Daily is going to be. This is like our SaaS situation. Like the Walmarts of the world are going to say, hey, we're like introducing a new product and they're like 10 people who are Walmart employees. And then we're going to need a few contractors and here's how we're going to find them. And it's all SaaS out. So
why did you name your company Arise Daily? Before we go.
Good question.
Why did I name my company Arise Daily? Because fundamentally I believe that work should be uplifting. I feel like everyone should feel amazing about who they are and all this experience they've come along the way. I think the way that work is thought of now is very linear. Like, you rise through the ranks at this corporation and those are like the best workers in the economy, but that's not the case. And I think all of us have a multitude of talents. So for example, me, I'm an amateur photographer, I'm a consultant, I'm a founder. There are so many things that someone could hire me to like help them with at different rates, of course. So and they should be able to. So the idea is that eventually when you go to Rise Daily, you'll be able to buy projects from me from all kinds of things. And then even if I'm like not selling projects right now, I'm really busy, I can go and look at the range of things that I offer and be like, wow, like I'm amazing. Like every day you should be able to pop open your screen, see all the things you can do, and just think you're amazing. Yes. So I've gotten lots of questions about the name of it, right?
That's very cool. I guess final question before we're out of here. What's a book you think everybody should read before they die?
I think Daniel Epstein's Range. Okay, wait.
I love that.
So before they die, I don't know if that goes on, but I've been recommending it to a ton of people because it's yes. Josh is like nodding. That.
Well, I love that because I've had like 8 different careers before, so I'm like, I totally agree. But go on.
Yeah, I think his whole thesis in the book is that generalists are the people who, of course, specialists are really important. That's how, progress is made in industries, right? But really breakthrough things which happen are when some total outsider with a ton of different random experience, usually the guy who's really good at a pub quiz, right? Or Jeopardy, that friend who knows all the answers, right? They come in and they look at a problem in a totally new way. And the reason why I think that this is a really important book is because of how, in the future, the way work is done is we're going to just come together to do short projects and then we're going to span off, right? Their companies have a core group of workers and then 30% of the workers, they just are plugging them in for specific things and then they go away, right? And so the generalists in the world, and this was the genesis. One of the very first projects that we did at Arise Daily wasn't actually for startup or go to market or scaling. It was actually someone who was creating a garden tools company. And they were like, we actually need someone to help us create a catalog for it. And so we found them an expert who loves gardening, used to be a copywriter at an advertising company and was an amateur photographer. So that person could actually get that catalog done with the precision and creative eye of someone who loved gardening. And just, the way that we hire people right now doesn't allow us to do that. Right. And it was win-win and everyone loved it. So anyway, that's the future. And I feel like you guys are totally bringing that to life too, which is how do we, help people discover new things, right? How do we help small companies rank in Google in a really, in a way that allows other people to see them. So I'm excited. I feel like we're in the same boat, right? Building the future.
Yeah.
Well, cool.
Yeah,
well, kind of wrap up here. We've been talking to Heidi Fung, the founder and CEO of AriseDaily.io. Heidi, where can people learn about you and learn more about you and what you're doing over at Arise Daily?
Yeah, definitely www.arisedaily.io. Just click on the link, which says find me an expert, put your information in, and we'll get in touch. That's the best way. Or to follow me on LinkedIn /Heidi T. Fung. And I'd love to hear from you. Oh, also on Twitter, the handle is Heidi Fung. Or you can find us on our Arise Daily Twitter too. So thank you so much for having me. This is really fun.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us today, Heidi.
Thanks, Heidi. It's great to have you on. You're a great guest.
Absolutely. Alrighty.
Here, talk soon.
All right.
Thanks for tuning into the podcast today. We're going to go grab some tacos and beer, and we hope to catch you on the next one.